Welcome to Lyric Lab Poetry. My name's Martin Jago, and in this video, I interview the actor, writer, and Pushcart Prize winning poet, Liz Femi.
A very warm welcome to Liz Femi. Delighted to have you here, Liz. And it's been a while, right? It's been since about 2000, long time ago when we were last in touch. And so I'm delighted that I managed to track you down, read some excellent poetry of yours, and start this conversation. So, very warm welcome. And I wonder if you could start by just telling us a bit about your life in art, a bit about your backgrounds and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. I would say I sort of came into art through the side door, I guess what one could say. I initially started as an English teacher in Boston. I was in the Boston public school system. And the thing is, when I was in college, I loved the arts. I loved theater. But at the time, I thought of it as teaching would be like my primary focus, education would be my primary focus, and theater would be like this thing on the side that I just did for fun because I really enjoyed it. And then when I became a teacher, I noticed that all my lessons seemed to have this really dramatic component to it. Like even if I were teaching grammar, I would somehow have the students do perform a grammatic concept. And it got to the point where some of my students were like, Miss, we're acting a lot in class. And I realized I was sort of projecting. But it was always fun. We did so much performance. I loved working with them. I still am an educator. And so what I realized that it wanted to be the other way around, where I would be a performer primarily, and then education would sort of support my work as an artist.
Uh-huh.
And that was how it went for a long time until a point in which I felt like my desire and my potential as a performer, I wasn't getting the full expression of it. So there was this like agitated energy that wanted to go somewhere. So I went from acting to writing. I wrote a one-person play, and that was plenty expressive. That was wonderful. And once I got a taste of that, I did more writing. And then poetry took a bit more focus around the time when at the height of COVID, when we were all in quarantine.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
I
was
was I was I was interested to learn about that because, in
yeah,
some ways our careers are sort of run along parallel lines. We come from performance backgrounds and education. So tell me a bit about that COVID experience and how poetry grew out of that.
right, sure. And so I was itching to be in community again. And obviously the only way we could, everything was virtual. So I I had written one poem and I don't even remember how I came to it. It was maybe from journaling and just maybe I did an exercise or something. And I decided I was going to start this newsletter that would be take sort of the metaphor of a circle where we'll all be in like a communal circle sharing work together. And so I wrote the poem, I recorded it, and then I sent it to a small group of people and asked them to join me and say, hey, why don't you record something? And then I'll share it with the group. And so it sort of started as this little newsletter, going from one person to the next. And I was producing it and sort of hosting the circle.
Mm.
It was such a wonderful idea. And then lots of people got excited and they participated. And I loved that sense of community. And what was really lovely about it is when one person wrote, whether it was a poem or a short story, people would send responses, which I would
Mm.
now go
Mm.
there and send to them. And so there was a lot of encouragement and that felt really vital, felt important to do as like a communal arts and sharing. And then I had to write something the next month. So, or the month after
Well,
when it wasn't my turn. So I was when it was my turn. And that's,
can I
yeah,
just say that sounds to me very much like you have taken the sort of model of being actor and artist in performance and kind of applied it to writing, because I often feel that writing is a solitary pursuit. And what you've done is you've used those collaborative skills to inform your process and your starting point as a poet, which is really fascinating. It's not often the way it works, I think. I think if people come from, let's say, an English literature background and they're heavily into academia and books, and it sometimes feels like that solitary kind of world, but you have somehow built a way of kind of, I suppose a natural extension of your work in art in
Yeah.
performing art into poetry. So, but I think a follow-up to that is, can you maybe share a bit about some of the poetic influences you've had in your life, whether there are voices that have always been there, sort of poetically speaking, or new discoveries, and why those voices are important, and share a bit about that if you could, please.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that connection you made between performance and poetry, because I do think for me, poetry is very much in the body. And I think the body aspect of it for me became clear when I was performing my one-person show, because I realized when the words worked, my body was in tune. And so that was like a gauge for me to figure out when the writing was working and when it wasn't. And that was the same felt sense that I brought into poetry, and it's the same felt sense that I bring into the poets that I when I'm reading, and then I can tell when a poet clicks for me. So for me, I absolutely like my top poets that I love would be Gwendolyn Brooks, and Lucille Clifton. I just their um their use of metaphor. I mean, the what appears to be simple is not. It takes, forget, I'm currently reading a book by Clarice Lispector, and the narrator says something about how he achieves simplicity through enormous effort. And but you don't feel the effort because it feels so, dense. And the density of their work how it just moves me. In fact, Gwendolyn Brooks's Golden Shovel, her poem Real Cool, sorry, Real Cool, was what Terence Hayes used
Absolutely.
to
I
create.
just want to say that I read your Golden Shovel poem. I think it's just, I thought it was beautifully constructed, heartfelt, and original, full of exquisite sort of metaphor. And to see that just excites me so much to see what you're doing and to think about how that poetic form became a thing. Like Terence Hayes created this whole point of access for writers of color as well, specifically, I think, relating to Gwendolyn Brooks and her lived experience as a black woman in Chicago. And then all these other tales that come to poetry through that. So thank you for your Golden Shovel. And I think it was just moving and brilliant and wonderful to hear about some of those influences. I'm going to move on because I'm trying to squeeze in as many questions as I can.
Right.
Um, so you're currently based in London, and I wonder how has living in another city and country changed, challenged, and shaped your poetic voice?
Hmm. Um, for one thing, my senses are heightened. I it's just it's you notice the little things. It's how the sounds at a grocery store, for instance. What's similar, what's different. The beeping is something that I don't know. I was tuned into how beeps work. And I know this because when I was visiting my sister in Berlin, I watched their grocery process there versus here versus in the US. But it's the day to day. It's how I pay attention to when switch from one train to the next. What's the same? What's different? How do people move to the side or not move? And I'm so thankful that I can be that alert again. My senses aren't dulled just yet because I'm so new. I haven't been in London in a while, so it's in that sense, I would say that's been very helpful. Also, London is so rich culturally. I was
Mm,
just at the Modern yesterday. There's so much to take in.
yeah,
So I have a lot that I work with. I journal every night. I write down things that I see, very simple things in my day-to-day experiences. It's a line I
yeah.
hear, image that stuck with me. So that's been really expansive.
That's very exciting to hear. It's like those tiny everyday observations that we make when we come from somewhere to a new place, a new country, and just the everyday sort of quotidian experience that maybe if you lived in a place a long time, you would stop noticing those things. So I think that's really, really interesting to hear. I've got a process question for you next. Take this in your stride.
Okay.
It has several components to it, and I'm just really interested in the process of poetry and how you as an artist get to it. Where does a poem begin? What are the starting points for you? You mentioned journaling. How do you develop, shape, edit, and ultimately decide the poem is good to go? That poem is finished.
Right.
Is it ever finished? I don't know.
Ever finish? That's the question. Um, it's interesting. I consider myself, I mean, maybe I shouldn't box myself quite yet, but I can be quite slow in my process. And so in order for me to um, allow myself to accrete, a process of accretion or accumulating, it's good for me to have a lot of quantity. So what might happen is quantity. So what I mean is I might get a line of an idea for something, and then 3 days later, something else that's completely unrelated might show up. And so I just gather these things, and then sometimes it becomes a bit of a collage where like the process of metaphor is very much a fusion, right? Two things that don't seem alike all of a sudden transfer meaning into each other. And you can step back and see, oh, I can kind of there's something happening here, and I let it happen on the page. And then once I get that, then I just stay until it passes through, which can be hard to do because I do have a 7-year-old. And then walk away from that and come back. So a lot of, and there are times when what feels like the full form of a poem will come out in one sitting, and then all that's left to do, not, I mean, all that's left to do is a lot of shaping and but sometimes it happens more of as more as a collage over time that
Mm,
reveals itself. At the same time, I'm very much a believe in craft. So if I see something that a poet I love is doing, I will trace it.
yeah.
I'll kind of trace the poem and see what, just to get my body involved, and then I'll see something new in what I've traced, and I'll take that out and put it in a different pot and then cook something else with it.
Do you
So
mean that are you talking about how you might look at another poem, not just as a reader of poetry, but looking at the nuts and bolts of it and how it fits together? Is that what you mean when you say trace and
yes,
you're
yes.
following how the poet does what they do, which is really fascinating process, right? And then maybe learn how to or take that and reinvent it, right? That's fascinating. Can I ask you, do you ever have those moments, those very rare moments for me at least, when a poem sort of drops in and it kind of feels fully formed from the outset, like you have the whole shape of it as a starting point? Does that ever happen?
It rarely does. When it does, I
It's a
mean,
gift.
it is a gift and I take it and I'm so happy, but other times it is work. It is
Yeah.
definitely craftsmanship. But those moments do arrive, and I can tell when it's one of those kind of poems. And I'm like, okay, that's what it wants to be.
If
And
only we woke up every day to that
I know.
experience of poetry.
Yeah.
Okay, so has poetry or how has poetry allowed you to reclaim or reimagine identity?
That's a good question. I think for me, I mean, identity is so vast, right? I think of identity as in like how, even just for me personally, how I used to see myself, like I'm an actor. And then I wasn't just an actor. And then I was also a writer. And then did that mean? And now a poet. And now or having an experience, even with a piece of art, like becomes a kind of identity. Like if I read a certain poetry, I feel change and I feel like I
Mm,
become a kind of identity from that experience. Um, as someone who has lived a very in-between life, grown up in the UK earlier in my life, and then in Nigeria, then in the US for most of my life, my identity is constantly moving between these different spaces. And then we've got the part about my gender, and then, my identity as an artist. There's a lot of fluidity that I think poetry has allowed me to carry.
yeah.
Um, and I know this because certain poems I can tell when they're more performative. Like this feels like a play. This feels like there's more like the world is a stool on my head. I don't remember, forgot the line of my own poem.
You forgot
Uh,
the name of your Pushcart Prize winning poem. Yes. Yeah,
as
what a
well,
brilliant poem. And I'm coming to that next. But tell me, finish that thought.
poem for me feels like a performance.
Yeah.
It feels like dialogue. It feels like I'm in the middle of a scene. It's it starts in the middle of a scene, and that comes from my identity as a performer.
I
Um,
love that. I love that idea of identity shaped by and being in a state of flux, but shaped by our experience of art. I love the idea of taking in a piece of art. And that so actually the DNA of all the other artists that we connect with, and I can truly speak to this having read your work, because I just feel some of it's, what I've read, and I'm sure there's more that I haven't, but just so well crafted and a joy to read. And that, yeah, you take that in and it makes you think and reflect on your own process as an artist, but maybe even deeper than that on a subconscious level. It goes up somewhere and starts to sort of bubble away like something that's cooking on the, in a pot. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Liz, I wonder if we can talk about, and not to detract from the other excellent poems of yours that I've been reading, but we have to talk about the Pushcart Prize. Good River Reviews. You published in that journal. Tell us a bit about how you then discovered you were a nominee and then ultimately won a Pushcart. I'm living vicariously through this story, so please go ahead.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, it was exactly that really. After I was very happy, obviously, to have the poem be selected by them, and then I was told that my poem and I think six other pieces of different genre had been nominated, and I honestly thought, well, great, a nomination. What are the odds, right? And I was very excited to get an email from them and just feel their excitement. They were so giddy in the email to have had the win. And yeah, that was how it happened. It was
And so
very
that's really something, because I always feel that a publication is a win. We send so much work out there. So getting a publication, but then a nomination, and then being a Pushcart Prize winning poet is a brilliant place to stand. And so that's my last question. It leads me to what next for you and your life in art. You obviously have these kind of different strands in your life of art, but specifically with poetry. What's next, Liz?
I'm finding myself fascinated with prose poetry of late. I think I, one thing I would love, this is very much an experiment, right? It could completely collapse, but I'm excited to try it this year, which is a thematic, basically a mixed genre collection, a thematic collection. I'm noticing a trend in my writing tends to be about mother-daughter relationships, coming of age, black girlhood across the diaspora. I don't know if that's there's all the themes, but I kind of want to see what could happen if I put in a bit of prose poetry with the lyrical work I do already, and maybe even flash fiction. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm really excited to see what could coalesce in terms of if there's a sense of narrative and what happens in between narrative. How does poetry move it along? And what happens when prose takes over? So that's the experiment.
Very
If it
interesting.
doesn't work, then it'll be a collection of a different
Yeah,
sort.
I mean, that's very, very exciting, because I always felt there was this, where is the line between flash fiction and prose poetry? It feels like it's in an exciting area of possibilities and discovery. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jose Hernandez Diaz. He's a Chicano poet based here in the LA area, and prose poet who's on fire at the minute. So I've been reading a fair bit of prose poetry myself, and I think it's such a rich area in which to experiment. So I'm wishing you all the best, and excited to read more of your work. And just want to say thank you very much indeed for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us at Lyric Lab Poetry. And Liz Femi, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. It was really lovely to chat with you.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please do click on the like and the subscribe buttons and share this video far and wide. It really helps the channel to grow. I'll be back soon with more poetry content